Hey adapters, welcome back. Our guest today is Julia Jackson. Julia, founder of Grounded, has worked to forge strategic partnerships between leading climate-focused organizations such as One Earth, Sea Legacy, Amazon Frontlines, and many others. She has served as a featured speaker at leading climate events hosted by the UN and Politico, and has also appeared in Forbes, The Hill, NPR, and The Washington Post. Julia introduces us to her organization Grounded, a hub for identifying and accelerating scalable climate solutions by galvanizing a community of environmental change leaders, Indigenous people, experts, authors, researchers, innovators, and investors. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I am very excited about this conversation. Your organization is kind of sort of a unusual one, and I want to share your story here. So I guess just starting off there, you're the founder of Grounded. What is it, and why'd you start in the first place?
Yeah, I I come from a family of vintners, so my family's been in the wine business my whole life, and I've always had a connection to land. And my father, before he passed away, instilled in all of my siblings reciprocity and land stewardship values, where you care for the land and it will care for you. So I grew up sensitive to climate because wine is dependent upon nature and the cycles of nature. And I guess you could say that sensitivity had me more aware of different fluctuations and weird climate fluctuations I started to see in Northern California, where there were more extremes and mega fires, and personally have been impacted by the climate crisis. I lost my home to the Kincaid fire
Wow.
2 years ago, and I'm still really processing that. Living through the climate crisis, I think it grounds you in how visceral and real the crisis is that we're facing, and how it's right here and right now. It's not a 100-year problem. We have to address it now. But anyways, I was working in my family business, and just felt like I wanted to have more impact with the environment. And when my father passed away from cancer, I read all of these books around environmental degradation and our internal state of health as human beings, and that correlation between breathing in carcinogens and chemicals and destroying the planet, and how that is directly correlated with increased rates of cancer and other diseases. And so that was the health and wellness component in my father's death from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, was my gateway into the environment. And then I just started to read a lot more about what was happening. And the more and more I read, the more hopeless I became. And I just felt really overwhelmed with what we're doing to the planet. I mean, we're losing 100 to 200 species per day. We're in like the biggest extinction since the dinosaurs. And we're experiencing ecocide, where we're destroying major carbon sinks. And so, of course, we're going to experience the consequences of our actions if we destroy the natural world. And we can't expect technology to reverse the climate crisis. We need technology and innovation, of course, but we also need to really conserve major bioregions and carbon sinks and biodiversity. And biodiversity is really key to the conversation around climate change. So a lot of solutions are nature-based. I don't know if I really like that term, because I feel like some corporations greenwash it for carbon credits, but I do believe that we have to listen to Indigenous communities who are original stewards of this place we call home, and empower them to protect their territories and give land back to them. So I took a sabbatical from my family wine business after really experiencing the 2017 wildfires, where it was $9 billion worth of damage to my community. It basically leveled an entire town. Like, it looked like the apocalypse. I remember driving down the freeway and it like through a narrow alley of fire, and seeing the hospital on fire.
Wow.
And I literally felt like I was in Armageddon. And that was my wake up call. I mean, I was always conscious about the environment, but I wasn't feeling this sense of urgency about it, if that makes sense. Like I was, of course, concerned about environmental degradation and ecocide and the destruction of the natural world and the fact that we're living in an extractive, linear economy where we're just killing ourselves and many other species. But I didn't think, okay, this is going to happen right now with my generation. And so that really was a wake-up call for me, where I couldn't even breathe the air. And I felt the health consequences of being in a major fire. And I felt, to be honest, eco-anxiety, which is now a term psychologists use, and climate despair. And the only antidote for me was action, trying to look for what are the solutions to reverse this crisis, and discovering that there's so many out there and there are no silver bullet solutions. But if we scale all these solutions together, then we have a chance to really reverse this crisis. And so, of course, read the book Drawdown by Paul Hawken and was really inspired by the 100 solutions to reverse the climate crisis, and decided to found Grounded to amplify real solutions, not corporate solutions, because I'd gone to a lot of climate conferences and it felt like a lot of mayors and leaders and corporations patting themselves on the back. Meanwhile, we're heading off a cliff. So I wanted to dive deeper and discover real solutions that could reverse and sequester atmospheric carbon and help us as a species basically survive what is the most existential threat of our time. And so I founded Grounded to, at first we were a summit to bring solutionists together, put them on stage, not corporations, but the actual solutionists, whether they be in renewable energy, regenerative ag, and also to really scale bring indigenous knowledge and wisdom to the forefront. So yeah, just a lot of solutions to the climate crisis were present at the summit.
Well, it sounds like you were inspired, and sorry for the death of your father, obviously, but it seems like it really inspired you to do what you're doing. And, more mundanely, where'd you get the Grounded? Why did you choose that term to name the organization?
Well, a friend helped me come up with the name on a phone call, and it really felt like we are living in an age of so much like technology and innovation and a disconnect from each other and empathy. So that, like, of course, technology is great in so many ways, but it also has disconnected us from our relationship with the natural world and all the creatures that inhabit this planet. And so I felt like Grounded was just an embodiment of what I hope more people will experience, which is going back to more primitive ways and a connection to nature and being outside and being grounded to the earth. Because I do feel like we have a beautiful connection with this planet, and it's not healthy to be indoors all day. It's not healthy to be on Zoom after Zoom call. And so I think we need nature. Of course, our oxygen, every other breath comes from the ocean and phytoplankton in the ocean. And so we are dependent on these natural systems for our own survival. So the name Grounded really came from being inspired by just being more grounded individually to the planet.
Oh, and I can see the more natural side of it, but you could also read into it is that, everything's just, we're in this sort of unsettled moment, and it's taking seizing control of like what you're going to do. And so you're grounding yourself. So that's how I read into it. I think so. It's a really good name. Well, you'd mentioned the term solutionist, and I want you, it's a great term, people that are actually doing things. Maybe you could give us some examples of who is a solutionist that you're working with, and what do you really have in mind in someone who's actually doing that kind of work?
There's so many climate solutions out there, and I'm really not an expert. However, I've discovered a lot of experts in this area. And I define, I guess, personally, a solutionist with anyone that is reversing a problem affiliated with the climate crisis. Like, it could be someone working on A lot of people don't know this, but the number one contributor to the climate crisis is actually HFCs, which are they're way more potent than CO2, and that comes from not recycling our refrigerators properly in the end cycle of the refrigerator's life. And so I define a solution, say, for example, someone's working on refrigerant management, and reverse, like trying to mitigate HFCs going up into the atmosphere. I would define a solutionist as someone that is focused on that because they see the problem, but they have a solution to reverse it. I guess another example would be someone from an indigenous community that's really defending their land from an extractive industry and is doing all they can to conserve that bioregion and their land for all of us, because we're all impacted by a global ecosystem. So I define a solutionist as someone that's really protecting a vital ecosystem. I'm not like super big on geoengineering. However, I'm not like an expert, I would say, but the thought of, and that technically is a solution to disperse sulfuric aerosols into the atmosphere through geoengineering, but it scares me. And even though that's a solution, I feel like that's a Band-Aid solution. So I really believe that not all climate solutions are created equal, and there are so many of them out there, and we have to, as a public, be discerning about which solutions are not going to harm people and the planet. And that's really the criteria I look for. Like, is this harming an ecosystem or people that are on the planet, or is it not? And that might be a little binary, but yeah, I prefer solutions that are not geoengineering.
Yeah, they're taking a big risk. We've talked a little bit about that here on Cimpatico, those kind of large-scale efforts. Well, one of the words that keeps showing up on your website, and I did in the introduction here too, is scalable. And so you're working with solutionists that you're hoping to solve the climate crisis, and everyone sort of has a role. But doing something scalable is a hard thing to do. What do you do at Grounded to sort of bring that into the conversation?
Well, we've actually funded some solutions. So, of course, a lot of these solutionists need seed capital or funding to get off the ground, but not just funding. I don't think that's the answer. I think really cross-pollinating them with different types of people, whether they be different policymakers or even if they are funders or other people within the environmental space. One thing I've noticed about being a newcomer to climate, just being in this space for really 4 years now, is that there's a lot of great efforts out there, but there seems to be a lot of siloed efforts, and scientists aren't talking to solutionists, and you'd think that permafrost scientists are really speaking to the solutionists to really mitigate thawing permafrost, but they're not, and they're expressing a desire to do that. So really cross-pollinating and forming those connections and pairing scientists with solutionists, and also just connecting them to people that might be helpful to get their solution out there more in the public, or talk about their solution or fund their solution. And even I think like most movements are, I think all movements actually are from the ground up. It's not a top-down approach. So getting the public to really understand the solutions out there and what's available, because a lot of people feel hopeless and they feel overwhelmed, and there are just so many solutions out there. So I think beyond just giving people hope with amplifying these solutions through media and storytelling, but also like having actionable steps to help in their community, or sign a petition or do micro donations, whatever. I feel like the public really is being underestimated. And the climate conversation, I think, has been kind of in this separate siloed space, and there's been a lack of diversity in the climate space as well. So it would be nice to see more diversity and more people really engaged in solutions. And Greta has done a phenomenal job in leading a movement all around the world through taking to the streets and protesting the state of our planet. And that's the sort of approach I would love to see with solutionists, so that the public knows, okay, our house is on fire, but here are all the solutions to reverse it, and get excited and more optimistic about those solutions, and feel less hopeless.
You know, you've really made it big when you just drop their first name, and everyone knows who Greta Thunberg is, but just use Greta now. And so she's done an amazing thing. Okay, so you guys host summits, and you think you had to cancel your 2020 summit because COVID was just exploding, but what you're looking to go bring that online? What are the plans right now for your next summit?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's been a really weird year, I think, for everyone. And we were planning our second summit. So we actually had only had one summit where we brought solutionists together. We were planning our second summit, and then COVID hit literally like a few weeks, like in America, a few weeks prior to us having our summit. So we just wanted our community to be safe. So we canceled Grounded, and it was devastating at the time because I was really looking forward to seeing people. But then I really believe it was a blessing in disguise, because at summits you gather people once a year, and there's a lot of production that goes into it and logistics, but then people go back to their day-to-day lives. They might be inspired that day around all the solutions and the content, but it's not like an ongoing sort of content generation around solutionists. And so we strategized and had to really pivot because of COVID to an online summit, and we'll be launching it in the next few months, grounded.org, and really excited to be launching online monthly panels with different solutions per month. So we're starting with permafrost, because a lot of people don't know really the impact permafrost has, but we're basically, permafrost occupies 24% of all land in the northern hemisphere, and it's thawing really rapidly. And not only is this a threat to increasing more methane and carbon into the atmosphere, but there are also these decomposing animal carcasses that are now exposed to open air that were previously frozen for thousands of years. And there are foreign microbes that are potentially a threat to us as a species. And so I think people are very sensitive to COVID and the global pandemic, but our impact on the environment really does unleash the threat of future pandemics. And so that's something to be aware of. It's not just, rising sea level and all these other things that people attribute with climate change. It's also a threat of potential foreign microbes that could really impact us. And I know that up in Siberia, they had an anthrax outbreak because of a reindeer carcass. I think you and I actually spoke about that. And anyways, yeah, so we want to launch with permafrost, but really the solutionists to permafrost as our first piece of content, and have a video about the science. Like 25% of our video will be the science of the problem, and then 75% of it will be the solution around, okay, here's a solutionist working on keeping permafrost compact and cool with grazing animals, so that we aren't exposed to way more emissions in our atmosphere from thawing permafrost. So anyways, and we're co-funding a paper that will come out and probably realistically 5 to 6 months from now on the science of permafrost and how it will impact the next IPCC report, which was famous for giving us that 12-year timeline and countdown around the climate crisis with our carbon budget. And I think that because permafrost contains roughly twice the amount of emissions as what's currently in the atmosphere, it's definitely a big threat to us. And rising temperatures, it will create a feedback loop. So we want to present a solutionist really working on it and galvanize more people around the planet to get behind permafrost. But that's just our first piece of content. And then we'll be launching each month like a different solution and problem, like ocean solutions, like what's happening with, like, for instance, like kelp forests around the planet, and why are they a solution to reverse the climate crisis. So yeah, so we're excited to be championing people through video content around solutions, and then also panels for an interactive discussion.
Well, that's great. Sort of the monthly pattern there, and then thematically too, is allows people to kind of, like you said, just kind of get galvanated on an ongoing basis. Very smart. I think, yeah, the pandemic has really driven, I think, a lot of changes, some for the better. Well, we're getting toward the end of our episode here, and I have a question that I want to ask from the community room from Lisa. Have you been finding other leaders in the North Bay wine communities are getting involved in climate change work? Is climate change impacting the wine industry already? And have you seen any changes in your peers in terms of how they view the issue? So a few questions in there.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're an earth-based product, and of course, ag worldwide is going to be impacted by the climate crisis. So I think, just with mega fires, experiencing fires in wine regions is really disrupting a lot of our peers, and I think their sense of urgency, because like in California, at least, we're experiencing increase in the cadence of fires, and also the fire seasons are a lot shorter, and the fires are burning a lot hotter. And so I do think the wine industry is far more conscious, especially in the last 4 years, than they were in Napa, Sonoma, unfortunately, because we've experienced it firsthand. So I do think the wine industry is feeling urgent. I can't speak to really how much is going to be impacting our product, because we're really just beginning to see how temperature, and it's really not just rising temperatures, it's really also the extremes of weather too that will impact crops worldwide. And I think wine is a storytelling beverage, and I do think we are as a community really connected to the land and care about what's happening. And so I can't speak for my peers, but I'd assume that they're very passionate about this as well.
I imagine just in California, there is probably a lot of exposure maybe to some other regions around the world. So hopefully. Okay, well, I do want to wrap this up, but I want to leave on, I guess, maybe a call to action here. If someone watching this wants to get involved, they want to become a solutionist, where should they go look? What, I guess they can go to your website, but what are some of those first steps that you would encourage them to take?
Yeah, they can go to our website, www.grounded.org. They can also email my colleague who's running our online Climate Summit, Solution Summit, Michelle at grounded.org, Michelle with 2 L's. They can go on our Instagram. It's just grounded. And if they want to get active, there's so many other amazing organizations they can also check out, like Amazon Frontlines, One Earth, and the Global Safety Net. Of course, there's just an abundance of other organizations. Sea Legacy, Only One. They can check that out. They can read the book Drawdown. They can watch some documentaries like 2040, which is really focused on the solutions to reverse the climate crisis. There's a lot of resources out there, and we're actually doing a website relaunch right now. So we'll list some of our organizations we really respect and admire and have supported, plus some books people can read and things they can watch to get more involved, not with the problem, but the solutions to reverse the problem.
Okay, well, I encourage people to go check out the website, and through this page we'll have links and such that they can go check these things out. And Julia, really appreciate what you're doing and coming on here and sharing your story. And on vacation and such, and I appreciate you making the time for us. And I want to take you into just chatting before I let you go. But again, thanks for joining Cimpatico, and we will be right back in the just chatting session.
Thank you so much, Doug.